When my sister divorced, my parents simply erased her from the family. But the worst part came when my mother saw a photo of the twins on the shelf and said, "No pictures of bastards on my wall." Those words shattered something inside me. They were only 5 years old, and they were already being rejected for something they had no control over. The next day, I went to a print shop. I chose the most beautiful photos of both girls, their purest smiles, and made an album just for them. On the cover, I wrote, "Daughters of Love, Granddaughters by Right." And I gave the album to my sister with a note. "If they don't want to see, then we'll show the world." The twins still sleep holding that album today. And my mother, she still hasn't seen it. But one day she will. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and this is the story of how I chose love over family loyalty, and how sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply refusing to let someone be forgotten. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September. The autumn air in Denver carried that crisp promise of change. But inside our family home on Maple Street, the atmosphere was suffocating. My mother, Patricia Martinez, stood in the living room like a sentinel, her arms crossed over her chest, staring at the mantelpiece where family photos had once created a warm collage of memories. Now, there were conspicuous gaps where my sister Carmen's pictures used to be. "Mom, you can't just pretend she doesn't exist," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was 28 then, old enough to speak my mind, but the dynamics of our traditional Mexican-American household still made confrontation feel like walking on broken glass. "I'm not pretending anything, Rebecca. She made her choice when she filed those papers." Patricia's voice carried the weight of disappointment that had settled over our family like dust over abandoned furniture. "A good Catholic woman doesn't divorce her husband. She doesn't break up a family." I wanted to remind her that Carmen's husband, David, had been cheating on her for 2 years. That he'd come home drunk more nights than sober. That the twins, Isabella and Sophia, had started flinching whenever they heard his car in the driveway. But I knew better than to argue with my mother when she'd already made up her mind. Patricia Martinez didn't just hold grudges, she built monuments to them. The house felt different without Carmen's laughter echoing from the kitchen, without the twins' small voices calling for their grandmother. The silence was oppressive, like a heavy blanket that none of us could shake off. My father, Miguel, had taken to spending longer hours at his auto repair shop, coming home only when he was sure the topic of Carmen wouldn't come up at dinner. 3 weeks after Carmen moved into her small apartment across town, I was helping my mother reorganize the living room when she picked up a framed photo from the end table. It was a picture of Isabella and Sophia from last Christmas, their faces bright with joy as they held matching teddy bears. The twins were 5 years old, with dark curls that caught the light, and eyes that sparkled with the kind of innocence that makes you believe the world is still good. My mother stared at the photo for a long moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she was remembering how those little girls used to run to her every Sunday after church, how they'd beg her to make her famous churros, how they'd fall asleep on her lap while she told them stories about their ancestors in Mexico. Instead, she set the photo face down on the coffee table and said, "I won't have pictures of bastards on my wall." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing become shallow. Those beautiful little girls, who had done nothing wrong except exist in the aftermath of their parents' broken marriage, were being branded with a word that felt like violence. "Mom, they're your granddaughters," I managed to say, though my voice cracked with emotion. "They're the children of a divorced woman," she replied, her tone final and cold. "In our family, we don't celebrate sin." I left the house that evening feeling like I was carrying shards of glass in my chest. The drive through Denver's familiar streets blurred through my tears. I passed the park where I used to take Isabella and Sophia to feed the ducks, the ice cream shop where they'd always order the same flavor, strawberry with rainbow sprinkles, and the library where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings reading picture books together. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the photo lying face down on the coffee table, about the word my mother had used to describe 2 innocent children, about the way Isabella had asked me the week before why Grandma Patricia didn't want to see them anymore. I'd told her that Grandma was just sad and needed time, But how do you explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes love comes with conditions she'll never understand? The next morning, I called in sick to work. I taught 3rd grade at Franklin Elementary, and I knew my students would notice if I showed up with red eyes and a broken heart. Instead, I drove to Carmen's apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place in a complex that had seen better days. The walls were thin, and you could hear the neighbor's television through the bedroom wall, but Carmen had made it as warm and welcoming as she could with limited resources. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" Carmen asked when she opened the door. She was still in her pajamas, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. But even exhausted from working 2 jobs to make ends meet, she had the same determined spirit that had gotten her through nursing school before she'd put her dreams on hold to raise her daughters. "I need to take some pictures of the girls," I said, stepping into the small living room where Isabella and Sophia were building a fort out of couch cushions and blankets. "Pictures? Why?" Carmen's forehead creased with concern. She'd been through enough surprises lately to be wary of unexpected requests. I knelt down to hug the twins, breathing in their familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and the faint smell of the lavender soap Carmen used to wash their clothes. They were warm and solid in my arms, real and precious and perfect. "Aunt Rebecca," Isabella squealed, wrapping her small arms around my neck. "Look at our fort. It's a castle where princesses live." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Can I take some pictures of you and Sophia? I want to remember how pretty you both look today." For the next hour, I took photos with my digital camera. I captured Isabella's gap-toothed smile, Sophia's concentrated expression as she carefully arranged her dolls, both girls laughing as they played dress-up in clothes too big for them. I took pictures of them reading together, of them sharing a snack, of them simply being the joyful, innocent children they were. Carmen watched from the doorway, and I could see questions in her eyes, but she didn't push. She'd learned to accept help when it came, no matter how it was packaged. After lunch, I drove across town to Morrison Photo Lab, a small print shop that had been in business for 30 years. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was a kind woman who took pride in her work and had been printing our family photos for as long as I could remember. "I want to make something special," I told her, showing her the photos on my camera's display. "An album, but not just any album. Something that will last forever." Mrs. Chen smiled as she looked through the pictures. "These are beautiful children. Your daughters?" "My nieces," I said, and the word felt like a declaration of love. "They're the most important people in my world." We spent an hour selecting the best photos, choosing a high-quality album with thick pages and a leather cover. I asked Mrs. Chen to print the photos on archival paper, the kind that wouldn't fade or yellow with time. This wasn't just a photo album. It was a statement, a promise, a love letter to 2 little girls who deserved to know they were valued. "What would you like embossed on the cover?" Mrs. Chen asked, her fingers poised over the gold lettering machine. I thought about my mother's words, about the rejection and judgment that had driven a wedge through our family. Then I thought about Isabella and Sophia, about their pure hearts and boundless love, about the way they still asked when they could visit Grandma Patricia. "Daughters of love," I said. "Granddaughters by right." Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "That's beautiful. It will be ready by Friday." The rest of the week dragged by like a slow-motion movie. I went through the motions of teaching, of grading papers, of attending faculty meetings, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about the album, about the message I wanted to send, about the choice I was making to stand up for what I believed was right. On Friday afternoon, I picked up the album from Mrs. Chen's shop. It was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. The leather cover was smooth and rich, the gold lettering elegant and permanent. Inside, the photos were perfectly arranged, each one a testament to the joy and innocence of childhood. There were pictures of Isabella and Sophia together, pictures of them individually, pictures that captured their personalities and their bond as sisters. I sat in my car outside the print shop for a long time, holding the album and thinking about what I was about to do. I was choosing sides in a family war, and I knew there would be consequences. But as I looked at the photos of those two beautiful girls, I knew I couldn't choose silence over love. That evening, I drove to Carmen's apartment again. She was making dinner in the small kitchen, and the twins were coloring at the dining table. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it broke my heart to think about how much our parents were missing. "I have something for you," I said, placing the album on the table. Carmen wiped her hands on a dish towel and came over to see what I'd brought. When she opened the album, her breath caught in her throat. She turned the pages slowly, her fingers tracing the edges of the photos. "Rebecca, this is incredible," she whispered. Why did you? "Because they deserve to be celebrated," I said. "Because they deserve to know they're loved, even when the world tells them they're not wanted. Because someone needs to stand up for them. And it might as well be me." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "But Mom and Dad, they're going to be so angry." "Let them be angry," I said, and I meant it. I'm tired of tiptoeing around their feelings while these beautiful girls suffer for their parents' mistakes. Isabella and Sophia didn't choose to be born into this situation. They didn't choose to have their family torn apart. But they're here, and they're perfect, and they deserve to be loved unconditionally. I pulled out a note I'd written earlier that day. It was simple, but it said everything I needed to say. If they don't want to see, then we'll show the world. Carmen read the note and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing them, for loving them, for fighting for them." That night, Isabella and Sophia looked through the album together, their small voices exclaiming over each photo. They traced their faces with their fingers, proud and happy to see themselves captured in such beautiful detail. "Aunt Rebecca, are we really daughters of love?" Isabella asked, sounding out the words on the cover. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to their level. "You are loved more than you could ever know. And anyone who can't see how amazing you are is missing out on something incredible." From that night forward, the album became a treasured possession. Isabella and Sophia would look through it before bed, sometimes sleeping with it beside them like a security blanket. It became a tangible reminder that they were valued, that their lives mattered, that there were people in the world who would fight for them. The fallout at home was immediate and severe. When my mother discovered what I'd done, she flew into a rage that shook the walls of our house. She accused me of betraying the family, of encouraging Carmen's sinful behavior, of undermining the moral foundation she'd spent her life building. "You've chosen them over us," she said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You've chosen strangers over your own family." "They're not strangers, Mom," I replied, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "They're family, too. They're your granddaughters, whether you want to acknowledge it or not." My father tried to mediate, but his heart wasn't in it. He'd grown up in a generation where men didn't question their wives' decisions about family matters, where keeping the peace was more important than standing up for what was right. The tension in our house became unbearable. Dinners were silent affairs, punctuated only by the sound of silverware against plates and the weight of unspoken words. My mother would look at me with eyes full of disappointment and betrayal, and I would look back with eyes full of determination and love. Months passed. Carmen found a better job at a downtown clinic, and she was able to move to a nicer apartment with a small yard where the twins could play. Isabella and Sophia started kindergarten, and they were thriving despite the family drama swirling around them. They were bright, curious, kind children who made friends easily and approached the world with open hearts. I visited them regularly, and our bond only grew stronger. I became their advocate, their champion, their reminder that they were worthy of love and respect. When other kids at school asked about their grandparents, they would talk about me with pride, calling me their special aunt who made them feel important. One evening in late spring, almost 8 months after I'd created the album, I was at Carmen's apartment helping the twins with a school project when my phone rang. It was my father. "Rebecca," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Your mother. She's been looking through some old photo albums. She's asking about the girls." My heart began to race. "What do you mean?" She found some pictures from last Christmas, before everything happened. She's been crying, Rebecca. She's been sitting in the living room crying and looking at these pictures of Isabella and Sophia. I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of hope and skepticism. What does she want, Dad? She wants to see them, he said quietly. She wants to know if they're okay, if they're happy, if they remember her. I looked across the room at Isabella and Sophia, who were bent over their art project, their dark heads together as they shared crayons and whispered secrets. They were beautiful, resilient, full of life and love despite everything they'd been through. I'll talk to Carmen, I said. But Dad, if Mom wants to see them, she has to accept them completely. No conditions, no judgments, no ultimatums. These girls have been through enough. I understand, he said. She understands too. I think she's finally ready to choose love over pride. The reunion took place on a Sunday afternoon in May. Carmen dressed the twins in their favorite dresses, Isabella in yellow with tiny flowers, Sophia in blue with butterflies. They were nervous and excited, clutching the photo album I'd made for them like a talisman. When my mother opened the door and saw her granddaughters standing on the porch, her carefully composed facade crumbled. She knelt down to their level, her arms open wide, and they ran to her without hesitation. Love, it seemed, had no memory of rejection. "I'm sorry," she whispered into their hair as she held them. "I'm so sorry, my beautiful girls. Grandma was wrong. Grandma was so wrong." Isabella pulled back to look at her grandmother's face. "We have a book about us," she said proudly. "Aunt Rebecca made it. Want to see?" My mother's eyes met mine over the twins' heads, and I saw recognition there, understanding, maybe even gratitude. She nodded, her eyes bright with tears. They spent the afternoon looking through the album together, my mother listening as Isabella and Sophia told her about each photo, about what they'd been doing, about how much they'd missed her. It was a slow healing, tentative and fragile, but it was a beginning. Later, after Carmen had taken the twins home, my mother and I sat in the living room where this whole journey had started. "The album is beautiful," she said quietly. "They're beautiful. They've grown so much." "They've always been beautiful, Mom," I said. "You just couldn't see it before." She nodded, her hands folded in her lap. "I was so angry," she said, "so hurt about Carmen's divorce, about what I thought it meant for our family's reputation. I forgot that those little girls were innocent. I forgot that they were mine to love. They still are," I said. "They still want to be." My mother reached for the photo that had been lying face down on the coffee table for months. She turned it over, looking at Isabella and Sophia's Christmas faces, and placed it back on the mantelpiece where it belonged. "I want to make this right," she said. "I want to be their grandmother again." "Then be their grandmother," I said. "Love them without conditions. Show up for them. Let them know they're wanted." Over the following months, my mother threw herself into rebuilding her relationship with the twins. She learned to braid their hair, taught them to make churros, read them stories about their family history. She attended their school plays and birthday parties, cheered at their soccer games, and slowly earned back their trust. The photo album remained special to Isabella and Sophia, a reminder of the time when they were rejected and the person who refused to let them be forgotten. But now it was joined by new photos on my mother's mantelpiece, pictures of birthday parties and family dinners, of Halloween costumes and Christmas mornings, of a family that had been broken and slowly, carefully healed. Carmen and my mother's relationship took longer to repair. There were conversations that lasted long into the night, tears and accusations and forgiveness that came in waves. But they worked at it, motivated by their love for the twins and their desire to rebuild what had been lost. 1 year after I'd created the album, we were all gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had been restored with new appreciation for its importance. Isabella and Sophia were showing off their latest school projects, their voices bright with excitement as they competed for their grandmother's attention. My mother caught my eye across the table and smiled. "Thank you," she mouthed silently, and I knew she wasn't just thanking me for the album. She was thanking me for choosing love over peace, for standing up for what was right. for refusing to let fear and pride destroy what mattered most. As I watched my nieces laugh with their grandmother, as I saw Carmen's face relaxed and happy for the first time in months, I thought about the power of small acts of rebellion. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply refuse to let someone be erased. Sometimes love requires you to stand up, to speak out, to create something beautiful in the face of rejection. The album still sits on Isabella and Sophia's shared bookshelf, its leather cover worn soft from handling. Sometimes they still look through it before bed, remembering the time when they felt unwanted and the aunt who made them feel precious. But now it's surrounded by new albums, new photos, new memories of a family that learned to choose love over judgment. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I think about that Tuesday morning when everything changed. I think about the photo lying face down on the coffee table, about the word that shattered my heart, about the choice I made to fight for two little girls who deserved better. I think about how sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply refusing to let someone be forgotten. How sometimes love requires you to stand up, to speak out, to create something beautiful in the face of rejection. How sometimes the smallest gesture, a photo album, a note, a refusal to accept unacceptable behavior, can change everything. Isabella and Sophia are 9 years old now, confident and happy, and secure in their place in the world. They know they're loved, they know they're valued, and they know that when the world tries to tell them they're not wanted, there are people who will fight for them. And me? I'm still the third-grade teacher who believes in the power of love to overcome fear. Still the aunt who will always choose her nieces over family politics. Still the woman who learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons or words, but with photo albums and unconditional love. The twins still sleep with that album sometimes, and when they do, I know they're dreaming of a world where love wins, where families heal, where little girls are treasured for exactly who they are. And in the morning, when they wake up, they'll find that world waiting for them, because sometimes the most powerful magic is simply refusing to give up on love. This is my story. This is how I learned that love is not passive, that it requires action and courage, and sometimes rebellion. This is how I learned that the most important photographs are not the ones hanging on walls, but the ones that live in our hearts, reminding us of who we are and who we're meant to love. And this is how two little girls learned that they are daughters of love, granddaughters by right, and worthy of every beautiful thing this world has to offer. But the story doesn't end there. Because sometimes, the most profound transformations happen not in the moments of grand gestures, but in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the accumulated weight of small choices made with love. 2 years after that first album, I found myself standing in the same print shop where this journey had begun. But this time I wasn't alone. Isabella and Sophia flanked me on either side, their now 7-year-old faces bright with excitement as they watched Mrs. Chen arrange their latest school photos. "Aunt Rebecca, can we make an album for Grandma Patricia?" Isabella asked, her voice carrying the kind of earnest hope that can move mountains. She's been so sad lately. My mother had been struggling with arthritis, her hands growing stiff and painful, making it difficult for her to do the intricate needlework that had once brought her such joy. The woman who had once stood rigid in her judgments now moved slowly through the world, her body betraying her in ways her spirit had never imagined. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to their level. "What kind of album do you want to make?" Sophia, always the more thoughtful of the two, considered this seriously. "One that shows her how much we love her. One that shows her all the good things." And so began our second project of remembrance and love. But this time, instead of creating something in defiance of rejection, we were creating something in celebration of acceptance. The twins insisted on being involved in every decision, from selecting the photos to choosing the words for the cover. We spent weeks gathering images that told the story of healing. There were photos of my mother teaching the twins to make tamales, her arthritic fingers guiding their small hands as they shaped the masa. Pictures of her reading to them in the garden, her voice carrying the cadence of stories she'd learned from her own grandmother in Guadalajara. Images of birthday parties and holiday gatherings, of a family that had learned to expand its definition of love. The twins decided the cover should read Abuela's Love Story in both English and Spanish, because, as Isabella pointed out, Grandma's love is big enough for both languages. When we presented the album to my mother on her 68th birthday, she opened it with trembling hands and tears streaming down her cheeks. Each page was a testament to the woman she had become, the grandmother she had chosen to be despite the grandmother she had once refused to be. "Look, Abuela," Sophia said, pointing to a photo of my mother braiding Isabella's hair. "This is when you taught us that love is in the details." My mother looked at me over the twins' heads, her eyes holding a depth of gratitude and understanding that words could never capture. "You taught them that," she whispered. "You taught all of us that." That evening, after the birthday celebration had ended, and the twins were tucked into bed in my mother's guest room, a room that had been redecorated specifically for their visits, my mother and I sat in the kitchen, sharing tea and the comfortable silence of people who had weathered storms together. "Do you remember," she said softly, "when you were little and you used to collect broken things, broken toys, broken jewelry, even broken flowers from the garden?" I smiled, remembering. "You used to get so frustrated with me for bringing trash into the house. I didn't understand then," she continued, "that you weren't collecting broken things. You were collecting things that needed to be loved back to wholeness. You were collecting things that everyone else had given up on." She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I was one of those broken things, wasn't I? When I said those terrible words about the girls, when I closed my heart to them, I was broken. And you loved me back to wholeness." The weight of her words settled between us, heavy with truth and redemption. "We all break sometimes, Mom," I said. "The difference is whether we let ourselves be loved back together." As the years passed, our family album collection grew. The twins started making their own albums, documenting their adventures and achievements with the same care and attention I had once brought to preserving their existence. They made albums for their friends, for their teachers, for anyone who needed to be reminded that they were seen and valued. Carmen eventually met someone new, a kind pediatric nurse named James, who fell in love not just with her, but with the twins who came as part of the package. Their wedding album, created collaboratively by Isabella and Sophia, became a celebration of blended families and second chances. But it was during Isabella's 8th grade graduation that the full circle of our story revealed itself. She had been selected as valedictorian, her academic excellence a source of pride for our entire family. As she stood at the podium, delivering her speech about the power of being seen, I watched my mother in the audience, her face radiant with pride and love. "Sometimes," Isabella said, her young voice carrying across the auditorium with surprising strength, "the most important thing you can do for someone is to see them when they feel invisible. My Aunt Rebecca taught me that when she made an album to show the world that my sister and I existed, that we mattered, that we were worthy of love." She paused, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. "But she also taught me that seeing someone isn't just about taking their picture. It's about taking their picture and then doing something with it. It's about creating something beautiful from something broken. It's about refusing to let anyone be forgotten." The audience was silent, captivated by this young woman who spoke with the wisdom of someone who had learned early that love requires action, that being seen requires someone brave enough to look. Today, I want to announce that my sister Sophia and I are starting a project called Seen and Loved. We're going to make photo albums for kids in foster care, for elderly people in nursing homes, for anyone who needs to be reminded that they matter, because everyone deserves to have their story told with love. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was too busy watching my mother, tears streaming down her face, as she applauded her granddaughter's compassion and courage. The woman who had once refused to display photos of bastards was now witnessing those same children grown into young people who understood the transformative power of being seen. After the ceremony, as our family gathered for the traditional celebration dinner, Isabella pulled me aside. "Aunt Rebecca," she said, her voice suddenly shy and uncertain in the way of teenagers who are afraid their ideas might be too big. Do you think our project could really make a difference?" I looked at this remarkable young woman who had grown from a rejected 5-year-old into a leader with vision and compassion. "Sweetheart," I said, "you've already made a difference. You've shown that pain can become purpose, that rejection can become resilience, that being seen can inspire others to see." She hugged me tightly, and I realized that this was what I had been fighting for all those years ago. Not just the right for Isabella and Sophia to be loved, but the right for them to become the kind of people who could love others. Not just the right to be seen, but the right to develop the vision to see others. The Seen and Loved project exceeded all our expectations. Within a year, Isabella and Sophia had created albums for over 50 individuals, each one a unique celebration of a life that had been overlooked or forgotten. They recruited friends from school, teachers, and community members to help with the project, creating a network of people committed to seeing and celebrating others. Mrs. Chen at the print shop became their unofficial mentor, teaching them advanced techniques for photo editing and album creation. She refused to accept payment for any of the albums, insisting that the project was her contribution to making the world a more compassionate place. One particularly moving moment came when they presented an album to Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman at the local assisted living facility who had been forgotten by her family. The album contained photos of her daily life, tending to her small garden, reading in the library, playing cards with other residents, but also included old photographs that Sophia had found in Mrs. Rodriguez's room and restored. "No one has ever made anything beautiful about my life, Mrs. Eso," Rodriguez whispered as she turned the pages. "I thought I was invisible." "You were never invisible," Isabella replied. "You were just waiting for someone to focus the camera." That phrase became the unofficial motto of their project. You were never invisible. You were just waiting for someone to focus the camera. As the twins entered high school, their project evolved and expanded. They started teaching photography classes at the community center, showing other young people how to use cameras as tools of compassion. They partnered with local social service agencies to create albums for families in transition, for veterans struggling with isolation, for anyone who needed to be reminded of their worth. The project caught the attention of a local news station, then a national magazine, then a television documentary crew. But fame never changed the essential nature of what Isabella and Sophia were doing. They remained focused on the individual stories, the personal connections, the quiet moments of recognition and love. During their senior year of high school, they were invited to speak at a national conference on youth activism. Standing on stage before hundreds of adults, they shared the story of their own journey from rejection to acceptance, from being unseen to becoming people who see others. "It started with our Aunt Rebecca refusing to let us be forgotten," Sophia told the audience. "She taught us that love isn't passive, love acts. Love creates. Love refuses to accept that anyone is disposable." Isabella continued, "We learned that being seen isn't just about having your picture taken. It's about having someone care enough to frame it, to display it, to say this person matters when the world says they don't." In the audience, I sat between my mother and Carmen, all of us barely containing our pride and emotion. The girls who had once been called bastards were now teaching hundreds of adults about the power of unconditional love. After their presentation, a woman approached us in the lobby. She was elderly, well-dressed, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm Dr. Margaret Thompson from the Children's Foundation. I heard your daughter speak today, and I have to tell you, in 40 years of working with young people, I've never encountered anyone with their combination of wisdom and compassion." She paused, pulling out a business card. "We're starting a new initiative to support youth-led social projects. Would Isabella and Sophia be interested in taking their project national?" Carmen and I looked at each other, then at the twins, who were practically vibrating with excitement. "What would that mean?" Carmen asked. "It would mean funding, resources, and support to help them expand Seen and Loved to communities across the country. It would mean training other young people to start similar projects in their own towns. It would mean taking their vision and multiplying it exponentially." That night, our family gathered around my mother's dining table, the same table where we had shared so many meals, arguments, reconciliations, and celebrations. The twins spread out materials from Dr. Thompson, showing us maps of potential expansion cities, budgets for equipment and training, timelines for implementation. "This is incredible," my mother said, her voice filled with wonder. "To think that something that started with such pain, such rejection, could become something so beautiful and far-reaching." "It's not just about the project, though," Isabella said thoughtfully. "It's about what we learned. We learned that being unwanted doesn't mean being unworthy. We learned that rejection can become resilience. We learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let someone be invisible." Sophia nodded in agreement. "And we learned that families aren't just about blood. They're about choice. They're about deciding to love someone even when it's hard, even when it's complicated, even when the world tells you not to." As I looked around the table at my family, my mother, whose heart had expanded to hold more love than she'd ever imagined possible, my sister, who had found strength in vulnerability, my nieces, who had transformed pain into purpose, I realized that this was the real album we had created. Not just a collection of photographs, but a collection of moments, choices, and transformations that had rewritten our story from one of rejection to one of redemption. The twins accepted Dr. Thompson's offer, and Seen and Loved became a national movement. Within 3 years, there were chapters in 47 states, with thousands of young people learning to use photography as a tool for social change and personal healing. But for all the success and recognition, the heart of the project remained the same: the belief that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and loved. The belief that rejection doesn't have to be the end of the story. The belief that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to let someone be forgotten. On Isabella and Sophia's 18th birthday, our family gathered once again at my mother's house for the traditional celebration. But this time, there was an addition to the festivities. The twins had created one final album, a comprehensive collection of our family's journey from brokenness to wholeness. The album began with photos from their early childhood, including some of the original pictures from that first album I had made when they were 5. But it continued through all the years of healing, growth, and transformation. There were pictures of my mother teaching them to cook, of Carmen's wedding to James, of graduations and achievements and quiet moments of love. The final page contained a photo that had been taken just the week before. 4 generations of women gathered around my mother's kitchen table, working together to prepare albums for the latest group of Seen and Loved recipients. My mother, now 73, her hands arthritic but still gentle as she arranged photos. Carmen, confident and radiant in her second chance at love. Isabella and Sophia, young women with purpose and compassion. And me, the aunt who had chosen love over peace, who had refused to let anyone be forgotten. Under the photo, in the twins' careful handwriting, was a simple inscription: "This is what love looks like when it refuses to give up." As we looked through the album together, my mother reached for my hand. "Do you know what I've learned?" she asked. "I've learned that the most beautiful photographs aren't the ones that capture perfect moments. They're the ones that capture real moments, the messy, complicated, imperfect moments when people choose love anyway." She paused, looking at the twins who were now discussing their plans for college and the future of their project. "I've learned that being a grandmother isn't about having perfect grandchildren. It's about loving your grandchildren perfectly, exactly as they are, exactly as they're becoming." That night, as I drove home through the familiar streets of Denver, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with a moment of rejection, a photograph turned face down, a word that had shattered my heart, but it had become something beautiful, a story of transformation, a family reborn, a love that had refused to be diminished by fear or prejudice. The original album still sits on Isabella and Sophia's bookshelf, its leather cover worn soft from handling. But now it's surrounded by dozens of other albums, albums they've created for others, albums others have created for them, albums that document a life lived with intention and love. Sometimes, when I visit them at college, I'll find them looking through that original album, remembering the little girls they once were, the rejection they once faced, the love that saved them. And I'll remember too. The teacher who chose courage over comfort. The aunt who refused to let her nieces be forgotten. The woman who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply see someone and refuse to look away. This is our story. This is how a family learned that love is not passive, that it requires action and courage, and sometimes rebellion. This is how two little girls learned that they are daughters of love, granddaughters by right, and worthy of every beautiful thing this world has to offer. And this is how they grew up to teach the world that everyone, every single person, deserves to be seen, valued, and loved. That rejection doesn't have to be the end of the story. That sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with someone brave enough to say, "You matter. You belong. You are worthy of love." The album sits on the shelf, a testament to the power of being seen. But the real testament is in the lives that have been changed, the love that has been multiplied, the vision that has been shared. It's in the thousands of albums that have been created, the thousands of people who have been reminded that they are not invisible, the thousands of hearts that have been healed by the simple act of being truly seen. This is what love looks like when it refuses to give up. This is what hope looks like when it's backed by action. This is what family looks like when it's built on choice rather than obligation, on acceptance rather than conditions, on the revolutionary belief that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are. The photograph may have been turned face down, but the love never was. The love grew, expanded, multiplied, and became something beautiful enough to change the world, one album at a time, one heart at a time, one act of seeing at a time. And it all started with a refusal to let anyone be forgotten.